Welcome to the meeting. Thank you for joining us. I know it's a little bit earlier this time around, so thank you to those who have been able to make it. We really appreciate you being here. In the meantime, we would love it if you could introduce yourselves in the chat. You can give us your name, organization, and the country that you work for, the country that you represent, and we will begin this discussion shortly. So yeah, just introduce yourselves in the chat and we will start our discussion shortly. All right, welcome everybody and welcome to our discussion. We are going to get started in the interest of time. So for those who have perhaps just joined, please continue to introduce yourself in the chat. You can give us your name, your organization, and the country that you represent. And we will be able to figure out who is in our chat and who will be joining us today. So I'd like to welcome you to our fourth Lead and Paint Community of Practice discussion with the topic Compliance with Lead Paint Laws. So our discussion is hosted in conjunction with SAICM and UCT under a GEF-funded project. The purpose of our communities of practice is for us to really come together with a global audience and discuss issues and topics related to sound chemicals management, and it is in conjunction with SAICM's Knowledge Management Project. So I would like to introduce myself. My name is Maxine, and I work as a project manager in the Division of Environmental Health. So welcome from UCT and from all the organizers. We would like to thank our multi-stakeholder committee team who have helped organize this presentation, as well as thank SAICM for their support in running this community of practice. So in our background and doing all of our technical things today, we will have Eunice. She will be just helping with any technical issues that you have. And so if you have technical problems, please visit the WhatsApp link that will be on the screen at different times in our presentation. Just a quick, brief chat on how this discussion will work. This is not a webinar, but more of a chat discussion. So we will not be having extremely long presentations, but rather we will be posing questions to you as an audience after short, brief presentations, and we will then post a question in the chat, which we would like you to engage with and really answer the question and give us your thoughts. This is a non-partisan discussion, so we respect all viewpoints and we value all input, even if we may not agree with all of it. Please include your country and organizations in your responses and engage with each other's responses as well as with our presenters. So we will discuss a question in the chat. There'll be a 5-minute warning that will be posted, and we will be posting polls throughout the discussion as well. So without further ado, we can begin today's discussion. So I will start by just introducing our presenters. So today we have some great presenters with us. We have first up Steve Wilson, a senior attorney in the International Law Group at the United States Environmental Protection Agency Office of General Counsel. He handles international law issues regarding climate change and has developed and delivered environmental law training in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East, sharing insights on drafting and implementing environmental laws and regulations. He's a lead attorney on the team, providing legal drafting input on eliminating lead paint through the Global Alliance to Eliminate Lead Paint, coordinated by UNEP and the WHO. Welcome, Steve, and thank you for being here today. We then have Dr. Farida Hussein Were. She's a lecturer in the Department of Chemistry at the University of Nairobi in Kenya. Dr. Farida was previously a senior research scientist in the Environmental Management Division of the Kenya Research and Development Institute, and her research focuses on environmental and occupational exposure to chemicals and related health effects. She is a member of the Advisory Council of the Lead Paint Alliance and a chair lady of the Technical Committee on Developing Standards of Paints, Varnishes, and Allied Products for the Kenya Bureau of Standards. On several occasions, she has been engaged by UNEP and other entities in the environmentally sound management of chemicals and air pollution, and also works closely with government agencies and other key stakeholders to bring about the needed improvements in the industry. Next, we have Joel. Joel is a senior environmental management specialist at the Environmental Management Bureau under the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. He is assigned at the Chemical Management section, where he's involved in policy development, monitoring of industry and regional offices, implementation of projects relating to chemicals management, information and education campaigns, among other things. He's also involved in the development of the Chemical Control Order for lead and lead compounds and is still involved in its implementation. And finally, we have Isabel, who is a chemist who works in the Ministry of Environment and is working on regulations for waste management and substances. Isabel has provided technical support for the development of new regulations and their implementation, and currently she is in charge of the control of the lead in paint regulation. So without further ado, we can head on to our first presenter. And just a note that as we go through our presentations, we will be posting poll questions using Mentimeter. Please engage with those polls as well. We will explain how to answer the questions. And right at the end of our discussion, we will have some evaluation polls that need to be posted. And we would love it if you could engage with those polls as well. So let me hand over to Steve so we can begin our discussion. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks very much, Maxine, and welcome everybody. We would like to start off with a very brief introduction to the lead paint law compliance and enforcement guidance. We developed this guidance for the Global Alliance to Eliminate Lead Paint in collaboration with the UN Environment Program, the paint industry, and civil society. The guidance draws on the lead paint model law and on discussions with governments and stakeholders. We've provided links in the slides to both the model law and the compliance and enforcement guidance. First, the guidance, if we can go to the next slide, please. The guidance starts by outlining actions that governments can take to foster compliance with lead paint laws. Because legal systems and regulatory structures vary from one country to another, the guidance was written to be adaptable. Each country can decide its own approach. Next, on the next slide, the guidance includes actions that companies can take to document compliance. And then on the next slide, we set out the sequence of events in a compliance and enforcement system for a lead paint law. So starting on the left side, we have we have promoting compliance. There we go. On the far left side, we have promoting compliance. This will include actions the governments take to make sure that all the companies that are covered by the lead paint law are informed of what they are required to do. In the next section of this slide, companies verify their compliance. So the companies have their paints tested to ensure that they meet the standard set by a country's lead paint law. And if the paints do comply, then the company can certify that they meet the standard. This should apply to both domestic manufacturers of paints and to importers of paints. Next are the steps that governments can take to monitor compliance. This includes reviewing the certifications of compliance and conducting inspections and spot testing of paints. And finally, on the right side of this slide are the enforcement actions that governments can take if they find violations. This can include imposing penalties through civil or criminal actions, and can also include ordering recalls or seizures of paints that do not comply with the requirements. So this includes our overview of the lead paint law compliance and enforcement guidance, and I hope it provides a good introduction to the discussion today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thanks for that amazing introduction. I will now hand over to Farida. Farida, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm around. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm going to carry you through the background information for question 1. Yeah, the East Africa Standard Technical Committee, and this one consists of paint manufacturers. We also have the consumers, revised all the paint standard mandatory requirements to include 9 ppm total lead limit across the East Africa. The National Technical Committee for CAPS, that is Kenya Bureau of Standards, was also involved in the revision and harmonization of this standard from 2015 to 2017. Then thereafter, the public comments were collected and reviewed before the cassettement of the paint standard in 2018. So the standard was adopted in 2018. The paint manufacturers and importers were also informed about the 6-month window period of implementation of this standard. The stakeholders were also engaged and informed about the compliance with the mandatory requirement of 9 ppm standard and also the SMAC application. On your right-hand side, you can see the SMAC standardization mark, and we also have the importer standardization mark. You can see they are quite different. Next, please. Yeah, then the SMAC were issued upon conformity, after conformity with the requirements of the standard through industrial inspection and sample testing. Then small and medium enterprises were capacity built and trained to form cooperatives, organizations, so that the application of the SMAC is easier for them. Then we have the periodic random market surveillance, industrial inspection and sample testing that is always carried out for compliance. Then the paint manufacturers are supposed to carry out documentation of in-house testing and quality control, which is usually audited, and it forms a basis for permit renewal. We have also, for you to get, for you to pay these satisfaction fees, you are supposed, it usually depends on the annual turnover of the products. Then we have verification of certificate of conformity for importers of paints. We have periodic customer sensitization about the SMAC. Then the stakeholder engagement and awareness activities that has been carried on since 2013 to 2021. This is International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week of Action, which was also on this year, 2022, October. We also have the dissemination of related research finding in workshops and conferences. Then public notices are usually posted for non-conformities of the mandatory requirements of the standards. Next, please. Yeah, whereas we have this information, but you find in the informal sector, there are challenges. The challenges are related to their low purchasing power because these people usually need paints in small quantities. So it's very hard even for them to use the SMAC, and therefore conformity is usually a challenge. The informal market are also not very easy to access, and they also have low level of education on the standard requirements. It is also very hard to issue heavy penalties within the informal sector. Then the suppliers of the alternatives of paints, I find it very hard to sell these paints to informal sector because the markets are usually very, very small, and they use paints that is dispensed in small quantities. Next, please. Yeah, so thank you so much for allowing me to take you through this.
Great.
So that
Thank you
is,
so
yeah,
much.
yeah.
Thank you, Farida. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you for all the information you've shared with us. So as you can see, we have our first question posted on the screen, and we will post it in the chat shortly. And what we will do is, for the next couple of minutes, we will be discussing this question in the chat. So the question reads, in your country, what actions have been taken to inform paint manufacturers, importers, and consumers about the requirements in a lead paint law? If no actions have been taken, which actions would you consider or recommend taking? So as mentioned, we will be discussing this question in the chat. Please feel free to post your responses to this question in our chat box. If you haven't found the chat, it is at the bottom right of your screen. You will see a little speech bubble. If you click on that, it will open up the chat box for you. There's a couple messages in there already, so go and have a look. And as mentioned, please feel free to engage with this question, give us your answers, but also post any additional questions you may have for our presenters or anything else you would like to discuss. Great. So we are continuing to discuss this question in the chat. Continue to post your responses. It's great to read everyone's responses. Farida, I see there's a question here from Charlotte, which just speaks about the issues around supporting the informal sector to switch to non-lead paint are very important in many countries, as pointed out by Farida. I'd be interested to know if anyone has made particular actions to support the informal sector and what success they have had on this. Farida, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, for us within the Kenya region, we are trying, we are trying to form cooperatives to bring them together so that, because the issue around informal sector revolves around resources. They have limited resources and also training. So what actually the efforts we are putting in is that we are looking forward to start the training programs to empower them in terms of resources so that even they can understand the very standard. Because the standard, for example, even when they form cooperatives, well, we don't train them in terms of research and development of the paint. So that is an area that is still a challenge. But within this meeting, I'm sure at least we will get some solution, because I'm sure we have somewhere where this has worked, because like IPEN has been carrying out a lot of work within the informal sector. Maybe it would be important for them to share it out to see how some of these countries can navigate through it. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Yes, and if there's anyone else in the discussion today who feels like they can also answer a bit of that question from Charlotte, please feel free to post your response or any thoughts you have in the chat. We're going to move on to our next poll, or our first poll. So Eunice will put that up shortly. We are voting on Mentimeter today. This is a live polling mechanism. If you would like to vote on this poll, you can either go to menti.com and enter in the code at the top of the screen, or you can simply click the link that has been posted in the chat, and you can let us know what your thoughts are on this poll. The poll reads, which actions have been useful in sharing information to paint manufacturers, importers and consumers about your country's lead paint requirements? So please feel free to post your answers on the chat and continue to discuss question 1 in the chat as well. Great. So for anyone who's maybe just joining us, we are discussing question 1 in the chat. The question has been posted again. So if you would like to post your responses or perhaps ask any questions to our presenters, please continue to do so. And please continue to comment or show us your thoughts on our first poll. We will be voting using Mentimeter. So please post your responses either using the link and post it in the chat, or you can go to menti.com and use the code at the top of the screen. I see, yeah, there's some interesting comments on the poll as well in the chat. Those who have answered option 3, please give an example of what this means. So if you happen to have answered option 3 or chosen option 3 in the poll, perhaps give us an example of what you think that might be, or if you have any other thoughts from anyone else. Great. Okay, we are going to move on to our next poll shortly. Farida, I don't know if you would like to make any comments on this poll, if there's anything that you would like to add or say before we move on.
Yeah, I'm really grateful with the feedback because I can see a lot of feedback is coming in. I can see South Africa, they are trying to revise their standard from 600 ppm to 90 ppm. That is very good because within Africa, at least we are carrying out awareness. And even when you look at Africa as a country, I mean, as a continent, we have very few countries now that have legal limits. But what I'm aware of is that they are now drafting they are drafting now their legal, I mean, their laws. And this is a good time. Like now, this exchange is very good. And for me also, I feel very privileged because this is the time now we'll start issues of compliance. Because having law is one thing, and then ensuring that compliance is done is also another issue. So I'm very grateful for this effort because out of this, at least in terms of compliance, we are going to move out very well. And even now, when I look at the polls that are being posted, I can see a majority of the people are feeling that government publication is the most important. I can see also public advertisement is also very important. I'm also seeing like international lead poisoning prevention week is also very important. Actually, these are some of the efforts that have helped us to really come up with this law. So what is left now is in terms of compliance. So through sharing in this meeting, I think it will be very important that it will help us to make some step forward. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Farida. Okay, we will move on to our next poll. So this is the same as the previous poll in terms of procedure. If you would like to vote, go to menti.com and use the code on the screen, or you can vote using the link in the chat. Please remember that we are also still answering question 1 in the chat. So if you have any more responses to question 1, please consider posting them in the chat for us. Okay, we will move on to our next question shortly. So if you have any final thoughts, anything you would like to add to answer question 1 in the chat, please feel free to do that. And continue to answer this poll. We're going to move on to our next question in a couple of minutes. We have one last poll for this question. So if you'd like to answer this poll, just follow the same procedure of going to menti.com or using the code on the screen. Please also use the link in the chat to vote on the poll. We will move on shortly, so if you could post your responses, that would be great. Great, I see some responses coming in for this poll, so thank you so much for that. We are going to move on to our next presenter in the interest of time. So Eunice, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, and then we can hand over to our next presenter. Joel, please take the floor, and we would love to hear your presentation.
Hello, good day to everyone. Now, there are several agencies in the Philippines implementing regulations related to lead in paints. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources leads the phase-out or ban of leaded paint production through its chemical control order for lead and lead compounds. Now, other government agencies complement this regulation with their own regulation in relation to their respective mandates. For example, the Department of Health implements regulations against the use of leaded paints in children's toys or children's products. The Department of Education implements regulation on the use of lead-free paints in school buildings and facilities. And the Department of Trade and Industry incorporates the 90 ppm standards on paints and varnishes. And recently, we have guidelines on online selling of products which has leaded paint, which is contaminated, or even those with spray paints. So those are the policies related to lead in paints in the Philippines. Next, please. So there are three main stakeholders in the Philippines for the implementation of the phase out of lead in paint: the government, the paint manufacturing industry, and the civil society. For the government, they are the ones implementing regulation and conducts compliance monitoring. And then for paint manufacturing industry, we usually go to the industry association and assures compliance on to the regulations and collaborates with government in policy development as well as the updates in the different policies. For civil society, they monitor consumer product as part of their advocacy, and they acted as the catalyst in the phase out of lead in paint. Well, the success of the policy on lead in paint can be attributed to the collaboration of these three main stakeholders. Next, please. So in terms of compliance monitoring, we conduct paint testing using X-ray fluorescence or the XRF to detect lead levels in paint. So we go to the different paint manufacturing facility. And secondly, we also conduct capacity building and monitoring on our regional offices. We have 16 regional offices to ensure uniform implementation of the regulations. These are the pictures, some of the pictures of our monitoring in the facilities. Next, please. Now, we also have, as part of the compliance monitoring, we also have the permitting process. We have the online monitoring and permitting system, wherein we conduct, we promote permitting for the importation, distribution, and use of lead materials in local paint production, so that we could deter any use of lead compounds that may be used in paint production. We also have, in collaboration with the Bureau of Customs in Border Control. And then we also have collaborative efforts with the non-government organization. And just to acknowledge those non-government organization, we have Eco Waste Coalition, IPEN, and the Philippine Association of Paint Manufacturers. Next, please. And lastly, these are some of the pictures, photos of the collaborative efforts of non-government organization and industry association, and of course the government, which is a big factor in the implementation and the success of the implementation of eliminating lead in paints in the Philippines. I think that's the last slide. Next, please. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joel. Thanks for that insightful presentation. So yes, as you can see, we are on question 2. This question reads, in your country, how does the government verify if paint producers and importers are in compliance? If the government does not verify compliance, what methods would you consider or recommend to verify compliance in the future? We have posted this question in the chat as well, and so we will be discussing this question in the chat. Please feel free to post your answers and your thoughts, as well as any other questions you may have for our presenter. Okay, so as we continue to discuss question 2 in the chat, we are posting the first poll for this question. Please could you go to menti.com and use the code on the screen to submit your responses, or you can use the link that has been posted in the chat as well. And as mentioned, we are still answering question 2, so you can continue to post your responses in the chat as well as answering this poll. Right, as we continue to discuss question 2 and answer this poll, for anyone who maybe has just joined us, we are answering question 2 in the chat. It has been posted once again for you to see if you can access the chat, and we are answering the poll that is on the screen. And yeah, just a reminder to post any questions you have for our presenters as well. And Joel, if you see anything you would like to comment on in the chat, and perhaps give us some comments on the poll, you're more than welcome to do that verbally.
Yeah, thank you, Maxine. I'd like to comment on the poll. Well, from our experience in the Philippines, the best way to verify compliance is by testing at the facility, because right there and then you would have validated if the company or the producer, the paint manufacturer, is complying with regulation. Now we also have strict implementation of border control or permitting, but in the case of the Philippines, since we are an archipelagic country, it's very difficult to really control the borders, especially if you have so many islands. So very difficult, but in a way it's also effective. For independent third-party certification of industry, we have 2 paint manufacturers in the Philippines who have third-party certification. But in this case, I think this is very costly for the manufacturer to engage in a third-party certification. So this may not be applicable to smaller paint manufacturer. So that is my view, and that is our case in the Philippines. So I think all these are maybe effective in your own country. If not, then I think we can adapt also the experiences of other countries, which you are sharing in the chat box. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We're going to move on to the next poll question. So yeah, you can answer this poll on Mentimeter, either going to menti.com and using the code on screen, or using the link that has been posted in the chat, as well as continue to answer question 2 in the chat. It's great to see all of your responses and to see the discussions that are going on in the chat around question 2. So please continue to post your thoughts as well as answering the poll. Okay, as you can see, we have moved on to our next poll question. So please post your thoughts on this poll question using the link in the chat or going to menti.com and using the code on the screen. As mentioned before as well, we are still discussing question 2 in the chat. So please continue to post your responses to that. If you have just joined us, we are in the chat room discussing question 2 of this presentation. So please give us your thoughts. We will probably wrap up this question in the next couple of minutes. So post your responses to the poll and send your comments as soon as you can.
Hi, Maxine. Maybe I could answer one of the questions from the chat while the others are answering the poll. We have one question from Vera. How is enforcement and monitoring done with shops where there are specific machines to make mixes and prepare specific colors? Is the monitoring and testing done in prepared colors or only of pigments and base paints used to prepare those colors? From our experience now, these are small backyard industry, mixing paints, preparing paints, which is really very difficult to monitor. Firstly, they are not registered. They can be considered as part of the informal sector because they do not register with us, and we can only find them if we do survey monitoring or if we have reports from the different sectors, that there are really these types of industry wherein they are not registered and they are still using leaded paints. Yeah, this is very difficult to monitor, and if we do have a lot of manpower resources, we have our regional offices, but even if we have our regional offices, it's still difficult to monitor this backyard industry or the informal sector producing or mixing paints.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Joel. If there's any final thoughts you also have on what's been posted in the chat, any key points that you feel should be highlighted, or any final thoughts, then you're also more than welcome to give us those, and we will wrap up this question shortly. Okay, we will move on to our next presentation shortly. Joel, if you have any final thoughts you'd like to add, please go for it. Otherwise, we can definitely move on to our next presenter in the next minute or so.
Yes, a final thought on this poll question. Now, before we develop our policy on lead, on the phase out of lead, we have already identified, since we are collaborating with industry, we are collaborating with the non-government organization, we have already identified the potential barriers in relation to compliance with this paint regulation of ours. So the non-government organization provided us with several data in terms of the alternatives, in terms of costing on the alternatives for lead-free paints, like, for example, organic pigments. And the non-government organization provided us also information on what other countries have been doing, on the success stories of other countries implementing or using organic pigments or lead-free pigments. So I think to minimize the effects of these barriers to the industry, it is very important that discussion on these potential barriers should be done prior to the development of to the development or the implementation of the policies or regulation in a specific country. And I think this is part of our success story, is that industry have already anticipated potential barriers during the development stage of the policy.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Joel, and thanks for your presentation and for your expertise in today's discussion. So we can move on to our next presenter. Eunice, if you will just move on to the next slide, and then I will hand over to Isabel. Isabel, are you with us? And are you ready? You can just put your microphone on and your camera on, and then we will be ready to listen to your presentation.
Hello everyone, I'm Isabel from the Ministry of Environment of Uruguay. In Uruguay, the first regulation for the prevention of lead contamination is from 2003, and it regulates the extent producer responsibility of lead acid batteries. Then, in 2004, it is approved a more general law that limits the use of lead in different products as fuels, toys, and pipelines, as well as open the possibility of establish a limit for lead content in paints. After, in 2005, it was limited the daily bioavailability of lead in toys, Just in the 2011, Uruguay regulates the lead content in paint through the 1999 decree. It confers obligation to the producers and importers of paints. It established the limit of 600 parts per million for the lead concentration in paints. The restrictions reach architectural paints and varnish and other similar surface coatings, children paint as tempera and watercolor and others. And it excludes the paints which are used for industrial, agricultural, or commercial metallic structures, road markings, and automotive vehicles. The organizations that are involved in the control of compliance are the Ministry of Environment as the principal one, the Customs for the importers, BUSE, that is the online custom reporting system for the electronic processing of prior authorizations, permit, certification, or approval required by the various government bodies to carry out import and export operations, and third-party laboratories, which makes the test required. Next, please. The first thing that the producers and importers have to do to document compliance is the registration, in which they declare all the products they are going to produce or import, and the sampling plan to indicate which ones they are going to test. The registration forms is submitted through BUSE only once, and it is approved. They receive the license for imports, which is valid for 1 month, also through BUSE, who send the information automatically to the customs. This direct connection with the customs via BUSE allows a quick response from us, simplifying the procedure and avoiding long waiting times. To renew the license, they have to send the sample to a laboratory according to the sampling plan approved, and when they get the lab report, submit attestation form. So the first attestation they have to do is a month after the registration, and they have to add the concentration of lead and attach the lab reports. If products met the limits, the producer or importer obtains a license which is valid for 3 years, though they must actualize the attestations if there are changes in the products. If the paints do not comply, the producer or importer must submit a stock management plan, which consists of reporting the quantities currently in stock and the action they are going to take to remove the product from the market. Could be the re-export of the product or the destruction. The recovery and the destruction of their products is done at the expense of the manufacturer or importer. Once completed, the producer or importer must submit a receipt of work completed to document the management done. Next, please. So to encourage the discussion, I'm going to finish talking about some drawbacks and some possible improvements. This way of document compliance is centered in the license of import through the customs, thus the control is more effective for importers than producers. For a tighter control to producers is needed more human resources or more coordination with other regulation that applies to the industry. The update of the product list depends on the goodwill of the companies. The laboratories are not obligated to report not compliance result to the ministry, so if that happens, we don't know unless the company send it to us. The quantities of the product are not required in the attestations because we don't verify every lot. This procedure lays open the possibility of commercializing non-compliance products because it allows the companies to commercialize the products while doing the analysis and presenting the attestation. Therefore, some improvements we can make are to prevent the commercialization until the laboratory reports confirm the compliance. Another one is to reduce the validity of the attestation to every year or even for every import or batch. However, it is not as simple because it should be considered that implies more human resources, thus more cost for the government, but also more cost for the companies. So it will be necessary an evaluation on the balance between the risk we are assuming and the resources needed or available. However, if the validity of the attestation is reduced, it will be possible to request the quantities and the documents that prove it. This will be useful for the control of the case of not compliance. Another improvement could be to compel the laboratories to report not compliance results in order to be able to act quickly and stop the commercialization of that product. And the last one is need more means for inspections for industry facilities. Thank you. That's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Thank you for that fantastic presentation. So we will move on to question 3 now. Question 3 reads, in your country, how do paint producers and importers document compliance? If this is not required, what methods would you consider or recommend to document compliance in the future? So please post your responses to this in the chat. We will discuss this question for the next couple of minutes, and please feel free to post any questions for Isabel as well. And Isabel, feel free to comment verbally as the chat continues if you see anything interesting that you would like to comment on. Okay, we're going to go on to our first poll. So as you can see on the screen, Eunice has posted the first poll for us. As the previous procedure, please go to menti.com and use the code on the screen, or you can vote using the link that has been posted in the chat. So let us know your thoughts on this poll, and we will still be discussing question 3 in the chat, so you can continue to also post your responses to question 3. All right, thank you so much for your responses to our first poll. It is great to see some of the answers that you guys have given and that you've chosen. I think it's very interesting. We are probably going to move on to our next poll. And yeah, please continue to post the questions or your answers to question 3 in the chat. And you can continue to vote on our polls as well. So I think let's move on to our next poll. And same procedure as normal. I go to menti.com using the code on the screen to vote, or you can vote using the link in the chat. As mentioned, continue to answer question 3 as well in the chat. We love to hear your thoughts and to engage on these questions with you. And please feel free to ask any other questions for our presenters or any of the organizers as well. Thanks so much. Right, thank you so much for your responses to this poll as well. It's great to see those answers coming in. You can continue to vote on this poll at menti.com using the code on the screen. And while you're voting on this poll, please continue to answer question 3 in the chat. It has been posted again, but the question reads, in your country, how do paint producers and importers document compliance? If this is not required, what methods would you consider or recommend to document compliance in the future? We have got a few more minutes to discuss this question, so please post your thoughts for us and continue to answer this poll question as well. Okay, as you can see in our chat, we have posted a 5-minute warning. This means that we have 5 minutes left to discuss this question. So please continue to post your responses in the chat to question 3, as well as any responses to this poll on the screen now as well. Isabel, I'm going to ask you to come on if there's any final key points that you would like to point out or any questions that you would like to answer. And any comments on our poll questions as well.
Just to clarify that the limit is still 600 parts per million because the law is from 2011, but we have to actualize it, but we couldn't yet. But this is in our plans to actualize to lower the limit to 90 ppm.
Great, thank you so much for the clarification. You guys can all continue to post your final responses, and we will then wrap up shortly after that. All right, so I think we'll begin to wrap up our discussion. Isabel, do you have any final thoughts before we move on that you would like to share?
No, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we can move on to the next slide, and just a moment to say thank you to all of you for attending our discussion today. Before you leave, we would like to ask you to please stay on and vote on our evaluation polls. We have 3 polls that we would really appreciate your input on. This information helps us to improve these community of practice discussions, as well as feedback to everyone involved on how impactful and important these discussions and this community of practice has been. So please take a moment to fill in these polls before you leave. And then I would just like to say thank you so much to everybody who has been involved in this discussion. Thank you to our presenters who have given us their time and expertise for today's discussion. Thank you to the multi-stakeholder committee team for their role in planning everything, putting the discussion together, meeting with our presenters, and really just guiding us along the way. I'd also like to say thank you to the SAICM Secretariat, who is responsible for helping us to run these discussions and really allowing this project to be a reality. Yes, this is our final discussion for 2022. Please keep an eye out for any future communications on the future of this project. And then some final thank yous go to Eunice, who has been working in the background, who has been setting up the presentation, sharing everything, and just running all the technical aspects in the background. So a big thank you to her. And yes, I see there's a bunch of responses coming into our evaluation polls. So please continue to vote on these polls. As I've mentioned, it's extremely important for us to get your responses to help us understand the impact that these CRPs and these discussions have had on your work, and as well as the lead and paint world in full. Great, thank you so much. I'm sorry about the misunderstanding. We have recorded this discussion, so anyone who has missed it and would like to catch up, we will post it at some stage and circulate it with everyone who has registered for this discussion. We will also have a digest document that will summarize the discussion and have all the responses in the chat, and so that will be circulated to everyone who is registered as well. Yeah, sorry about the misunderstanding on anyone's side. Yes, we will make sure that times are clearly communicated, and just keep an eye out for the time zone that we post the time in, and just double check that as well on your side. So thank you so much to everybody for being here today, and yeah, continue to answer our evaluation polls, and we will see you in 2023.
Thank you. Thank you. Great.